It is Patriots Day, a holiday here in Massachusetts, but we are here and we are doing a show because last time we didn't, I got emails saying, how dare we take a Massachusetts holiday off that is not a federal holiday. So we are not doing that today, but afterwards we'll be heading to the Boston Marathon. Let's talk about the growing backlash and anger over Hillary Clinton's refusal to release transcript to her speeches to Wall Street financial companies. This is video from her recent debate with Bernie Sanders in Brooklyn, New York. And I have some very strong thoughts about her explanation as to why she's not releasing those transcripts. Take a look.
Why not just release the transcripts and put this whole issue to bed? You know, first of all, there isn't an issue. When I was in public service, serving as the senator from New York, I did stand up to the banks. I did make it clear that their behavior would not be excused.
Secretary Clinton, the question was about the transcripts of the speeches to Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
Why not release them?
I have said, look, there are certain expectations when you run for president. This is a new one. And I've said, if everybody agrees to do it, because there are speeches for money on the other side, I know that.
Secretary Clinton, you just heard her. Everybody else does it, she'll do it. We'll do it.
It really makes me miss Brooklyn, the rambunctious, and this was one of the better debates in terms of just the crowd. The crowd was not having any of the nonsense from either candidate, but this is terrible, terrible logic. I am only willing to do what the Republicans are willing to do. I am willing to be as open as the Republicans are willing to be. This is the Democratic primary. The Democratic debates have been substantive. The Republican debates have not been. The Democratic primary isn't a joke. The Republican primary is a joke. Why all of a sudden, Lewis, are the Democratic candidates going to be guided by what goes on the Republican side? It makes no sense whatsoever.
It doesn't make sense. Hillary probably knows that it doesn't make sense. Hillary just really does not want to release those. It's super obvious that they would be damaging. That's the only reason.
Well, the problem for Hillary Clinton, as Lewis is suggesting here, is that it could be trouble for Hillary if she doesn't release the transcripts because of the growing pressure to release them. But clearly, it could be trouble if she does because of what they might contain, because why would you not release them? Why would you say you're only willing to be as open as the Republicans as your explanation as to why you won't release them unless there is something you don't want getting out? Now, I don't know what that might be. I really don't. I have genuine curiosity. Former presidential candidate Martin O'Malley has also, he was on Twitter. He called out Hillary Clinton during Thursday's debate, saying she should share the transcripts and comparing it to when Mitt Romney opted to keep his tax records secret back in 2012 for a while. And former Barack Obama advisor David Axelrod tweeted about the inconsistency of Hillary's stance on the transcript, saying, not a really compelling or specific response from Hillary Clinton on why she won't release the transcripts of her paid speeches. And there is some idea about what might be in some of those speeches. Back in February, Politico tracked down some Goldman Sachs executives who were at that 2013 speech in Arizona that Hillary gave and said that Hillary Clinton was speaking, quote, glowingly of the work that Goldman Sachs had done to create jobs and raise capital. And the other issue is that no one has been able to specifically say what she did as a result of those payments. That's the second narrative, Lewis, where Bernie Sanders was asked to say, okay, well, you have this critique of Hillary Clinton about her taking money from these financial companies, but what specifically did she do as senator as a result? And his answer was not really very good. And David Axelrod did defend that and say not really a compelling or specific response from Senator Sanders on a specific Hillary Clinton decision influenced by Wall Street money. Maybe more interesting, though, Lewis, it's very hard to prove a negative. And what might be more interesting is, what regulation did Hillary Clinton not even seek against the financial industry because of the money she received? We will never know that because there is no way to prove a negative.
Yeah, you can't really point to, well, what did she do? many times in politics, it's what didn't you do is a much better question.
And a much more difficult one to answer for sure. And then the last question on these transcripts, why has no one leaked the transcripts? Certainly there are people who could leak transcripts or more extensive descriptions of the speeches, and the possible answer is one that I really don't like, which is that whoever could leak the transcripts is waiting until the general election. If you're a right-winger, why leak them now? Bernie does as well against Trump and Cruz as Hillary Clinton does, more or less, depending on the polls. So if you're a right-winger holding on to those transcripts, you're waiting for the general election if indeed Hillary is the nominee, and they could truly be damaging at that time.
That would be logical. At the same time, if those speeches are about how Hillary is going to help Goldman Sachs shareholders,
maybe Republicans would love that.
Yeah, they might vote for her.
At a town hall in Watertown, Pennsylvania over the weekend, a college student asked Ohio Republican governor and presidential candidate John Kasich what he would do as president to make young women like her feel safer on campus. And this is a reference to questions of campus rape and sexual assault. I'm going to play Kasich's answer for you. Some people are angry with Kasich because they feel that he was victim blaming in his answer by suggesting that the student should not go to parties with alcohol. Some people feel that Kasich was just offering sort of pragmatic advice about how to avoid getting into situations where you might be the victim of a sexual assault or rape. Let's take a listen and then we'll discuss.
We think that when you enroll, you ought to absolutely know that if something happens to you along the lines of sexual harassment or whatever, you have a place to go where there is a confidential reporting, where there is an ability for you to access a rape kit, where that is kept confidential, but where it gives you the opportunity to be able to pursue justice after you have had some time to reflect on it all. And we are in a process of making sure that all higher education in our state, and this ought to be done in the country, that our co-eds know exactly what the rules are, what the opportunities are, what the confidential policies are, so that you are not vulnerable, at risk, and can be preyed upon. I have two 16-year-old daughters, and I don't even like to think about it, you know.
It's something that I have to worry about, just walking.
Well, I also give you one bit of advice. Don't go to parties where there's a lot of alcohol. Okay, don't do that.
Some of this makes a lot of sense. I mean, access to rape kits absolutely makes sense. Feeling like you're able to make these reports confidentially and reducing the stigma and possible backlash. A lot of this stuff made a lot of sense. And then he got to avoid parties with alcohol. Maybe he should have also suggested wearing a suit of armor or a beekeeper's suit to not attract the attention of men. Okay, so this is a great opportunity to point out the sort of spectrum between victim blaming and reasonable precautions that people should take. Let's look at this specific thing here, okay? College student asks what to do regarding sexual assault. Kasich says, don't go to parties with a lot of alcohol. On one side of the spectrum, the full victim blaming approach would be, if you go to a party with alcohol or wear anything exposing your ankles even, you are to blame for being raped. And John Kasich did not say that. Let's be very clear. The opposite side of this is you should socialize like a normal person, dress the way you like, but be cautious about walking home alone late at night or ending up in places alone where you don't know anybody, have an agreement with a friend to check in on each other, whatever. That would be a sort of, take reasonable precautions, but you should absolutely be able to drink whatever you want or be wherever you want or whatever. This is sort of in the middle, right? Because of the absurdity of being a college student and being told do not go to parties with alcohol. This is a little bit in the middle. Is it a practical piece of advice, Lewis, to say, hey, great, co-ed, you're coming to school, don't go to parties with alcohol. That's the reasonable way to stay safe. It's just not pragmatic or realistic.
No, you could take it to the next level and say, listen, if you want to avoid this at all costs, you can go to your classes during the day, and then when you're done, lock yourself in your dorm and never leave.
That's right.
So it seems unnecessary, and to tell college students not to go to parties with alcohol, It just seems silly.
And the other thing is, if you're going to go that way, at what point is it okay for women to go to parties where there's alcohol, right? I mean, hey, whoa, you're now out of college, you're 24 now, and you're going to that Chamber of Commerce mix and mingle where there are going to be people drinking, right? I would avoid that. I would avoid that party with alcohol. Or hey, now you're 32 and you've got a kid, and you're taking your kid to the bowling alley, and there's a bar in the bowling alley where the parents are hanging out. There's a lot of alcohol there. I don't think the avoid parties with alcohol thing is realistic, but I also think it's sort of an absurd suggestion that this is the way for women to go through life, which is if there's going to be alcohol at any point that you might be showing up alone, that's when you have to realize that's not the place to go. So is Kasich the worst offender? No, and we should all praise Kasich, by the way, that he didn't go full right-wing loon on this, and he said a lot of the right things here in terms of the reporting, in terms of the rape kits, all of those things. So I would put this in the middle. I don't think this is the worst offender by any means, but there's definitely something a little concerning about just don't go to parties with alcohol.
Well, what do you expect? We're going to get some of that typical right-wing rhetoric.
It is a Republican governor from Ohio, after all. Send me your thoughts on this. I'm on Twitter at @Pakman. Donald Trump supporter and former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin has again attempted to use what is supposedly her native and only language of English to discuss American politics, and it didn't go well. It starts off with some kind of commentary about climate change. I guess she says that climate change is fake or something about Hillary Clinton. Let's take a listen to clip number 1 here.
Because Donald Trump is so reasonable and so full of common sense and knows that for America to be great again, we have to develop our natural resources. It's going to be helpful for the American public to know his view on it in terms of how do we develop our natural resources if so much of this climate change agenda is really just a political agenda to stymie development, no matter what it looks like with the media and their quasi-toughness on Hillary. No, I've said all along that the skids are greased for her. Trump's bringing in the independents, the blue dog Democrats. He'll have the Republicans with him, at least those who believe in American exceptionalism and planks in the platform that can get us there.
Yeah, and so that's like a little warm-up, Lewis. Do you know what she's talking about there? I guess she's saying real Republicans will vote for Trump and climate change is fake.
It sounds like the whole thing is about climate change. I guess if you want to drill, baby, drill, you'll vote for Trump.
So then she was asked about the convention, and this is where it really goes off the rails.
There again.
Do you worry at all about at the convention if they try to stop both Trump and Cruz from getting in, and maybe there's someone bringing someone like a Paul Ryan or some other white knight?
How dare they? Oh, these arrogant political operatives who underestimate the wisdom of the people. No, the people, we will rise up and we will say, our vote does count, our activism does count, and for those who would try to thwart that, they're the ones who need to leave. We don't need to.
If I understand some piece of this, and I don't want to assume that I do, Lewis, it sounds like Sarah Palin thinks that the will of Republican voters should be reflected in the selection of their eventual nominee. I guess to the extent that I'm correctly understanding Sarah Palin, I think I agree with her.
This is one of the few times we will be in total agreement with Sarah Palin. The second clip, not the first one about climate change being an agenda.
Yeah, that one I definitely didn't understand.
Yeah, she's right, though. And we're having similar issues on the Democratic side. So, yeah.
I continue to have a harder and harder time understanding Sarah Palin and understanding why she's speaking like this. And I'm not trying to make fun of anything, but do you think that she is on drugs or she has been on drugs in some of these appearances? Because there's just nothing, no explanation that I can imagine, which would be a reasonable explanation as to why she's developed this way of speaking.
Well, this is better than her last attempt that we played at the Donald Trump rally. But if she's not on drugs, she needs to be. She needs something to relax her a bit, maybe bring her back down to earth a little bit. I don't know what that would be. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, but I call it like I see it.
It's also odd that apparently Sarah Palin is saying she will be at the Republican National Convention this summer, whether she's invited or not. She said, I can't see any of them inviting me, because they are, quote, afraid of what I would say, but that she might have to, quote, invite herself. Republicans frequently do very, very stupid things, but the establishment seems to pretty well understand that you're better off keeping Sarah Palin as far as possible from anything you're doing.
By invite her, does she mean invite her to speak
I
or
don't
just
know.
be there?
Right, 'cause she can go, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it probably means speaking then. They know that, well, as we just saw, you might not want to do that.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, filling in for David Pakman. He is on his way to Las Vegas. He will be broadcasting from there the rest of the week. So be sure to be back here tomorrow for the David Pakman Show with David Pakman. Lewis, how's it going?
It's going great. Good to have you here. Nice
Thanks
change
so
of pace.
Yeah, it is. In a different seat, just doing my part here. Big day in New York City, primary day in New York. It is a huge deal. There's a lot going on with that story in the background, however. There's an article that came out showing that over 63,000 people in Brooklyn, not throughout all of New York, but just in Brooklyn alone, found themselves with their voter registration changed. New York City is a closed primary state. So with their registration and their party affiliation being changed, that was 63,000 Democrats that woke up and realized that they won't be able to vote in this primary because their affiliation has been changed. The organization called Election Justice USA has filed a federal lawsuit. They are seeking an injunction so that they can essentially give everyone who has ever been registered as a Democrat, anyone who met the deadline, give them the opportunity to vote, even if it's with a provisional ballot. But we also know that with provisional ballots, a lot of times those don't count. And so as a part of this lawsuit, they have sought the opportunity for provisional ballots to be counted today in New York City. So there's a lot going on. Actually, there was a hearing this morning at 9 a.m. and that has not been resolved. There's a second hearing, just getting word, that's going to happen at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're in New York City and you're wondering about your registration, if you're wondering about your polling location, I definitely recommend checking out Election Justice USA, checking out their lawsuit. They are recommending that people, if you were registered, to go vote. But that's not the only thing, Lewis. There's two other types of systematic, it seems, suppression. And that includes voting locations being changed at the last minute. And it also includes your voting time to have changed. There are 7 counties that have the standard time from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. But every other county in New York City is now only having voting between 12 noon and 9 p.m. So you have 3 different ways that it seems to be voter suppression in New York City. I don't know. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it is overwhelmingly impacting Democratic voters. And it seems to be focused right there inside of Brooklyn. What do you think?
It's strange because normally this is the type of thing you would see during the general election, right? And voting for your Senate members, voting for whoever. This is strange because this is happening during a primary. And so who is it that is trying to make sure people are not voting, and why are they doing it? It's
Right.
not the normal Republicans trying to lower overall voter turnout because it's good for them.
Right.
So that's what that is my question.
And that's the thing that really is most striking to me, is that this is happening in the Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, in the same article, it mentions that Republican turnout has increased in every single county. And Democratic turnout, or rather not turnout, but voter registration has increased in many counties, but you had a 7% decrease in Brooklyn alone. And so, realistically, it's hard for people not to connect the dots. You understand? So people see this is happening in Brooklyn. It's happening to young voters who registered, even if at the last minute, they registered by the deadline. And it's happening to people who have been registered Democrats for a very long time. It's hard for people not to automatically connect those dots. And so I think someone really needs to come out here, Lewis, and really talk about how this happened, why this happened, and how it can never happen again.
It's important. Unfortunately, it most likely will happen again. And it's not just the Republicans who are trying to do shady things to win elections for their candidates. It's happening everywhere.
And that's thank you so much, Lewis, for pointing that out, because really, when we talk about voter suppression, we always look at the Republicans. In reality, this type of suppression that's taking place, even if it's negligence, even if it's a systemic error in the software, whatever caused it, this is suppression 101 in the Democratic ranks, and something needs to be done about it. And thankfully, Election Justice USA is doing it. So I want to talk about the letter that Bernie Sanders sent to the DNC late yesterday afternoon. In the letter, he accused the Hillary Victory Fund of essentially collusion with the DNC to circumvent campaign finance laws. There has been a lot of reporting on this in terms of the structure of the Hillary Victory Fund, but the letter that Bernie Sanders sent to the DNC on yesterday really kind of raised the ante. And I want to point out a couple of the things that he said in the letter. He said, this is from his attorney to the DNC. Bernie Sanders' team said, it's of a grave concern that the Clinton Joint Fundraising Committee appears to be using funds raised by big dollar donors to fund activities that yield contributions and support that only provide benefit to HFA. Moreover, the Joint Fundraising Committee may effectively be subsidizing HFA's donor acquisition efforts because HFA is now able to resolicit the small donor over and over again. Right there, Lewis, I actually want to talk about that before we move on, because essentially what's happening, you have Hillary Victory Fund, which is a totally different branch. It is not Hillary for America. It is a joint fundraising campaign that merges the DNC with Hillary for America and 32 states that decided to participate in this. Now, them doing this in a primary is all but unprecedented, right? This is the type of behavior that you have and you see during a general election. And so there's a great report by Cenk Uygur where he really outlines this is pretty much evidence that the DNC and these state parties have been in bed with Hillary Clinton as early as August of 2016 of last year. I'm sorry, August of 2015 of last year. And so here we have them raising these obscene amounts of money. And there's a video of George Clooney actually talking about this most recent fundraiser. They're raising these obscene amounts of money. And the justification, Lewis, has always been that this money is going for down ballot tickets. But according to this letter from Bernie Sanders, that's not really necessarily the case.
Thank you, Chuck. Let me start with dinner you co-hosted on Friday night. Big fundraiser I know that you have planned for later tonight. Do you look at how much is being raised? And I think the co-host of the Friday night dinner, $353,000. A couple to be a co-chair. Do you look at it yourself and think that's an obscene amount of money?
Yes, I think it's an obscene amount of money. I think that, we had some protesters last night when we pulled up in San Francisco, and they're right to protest. They're absolutely right. It is an obscene amount of money. The Sanders campaign, when they talk about it, is absolutely right. It's ridiculous that we should have this kind of money in politics. I agree. Completely.
It's interesting.
That's a good spot right there. So he admits that this is an obscene amount of money. In the next clip, though, he starts talking about how he expects that this money is going to be broken down and help down ballot tickets and help state parties. And what Bernie Sanders' letter to the DNC essentially says is there may be money going to the state parties. There may be money going to the DNC. But the overwhelming amount that's going to Hillary Clinton disproportionately benefits Hillary Clinton directly instead of proportionately benefiting Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and all of the down ballot tickets.
But, I think what's important, and what I think the Clinton campaign has not been very good at explaining is this, and this is the truth. The overwhelming amount of money that we're raising, and it is a lot, but the overwhelming amount of the money that we're raising is not going to Hillary to run for president. it's going to the down ticket. It's going to the congressmen and senators to try to take back Congress.
Lewis, there's a slide in there. If you go to the breakdown of the Hillary for America, actually, yeah, let me just pick it up right here. Bernie 2016 is concerned that at best, the joint fundraising committee's spending on direct mail and online advertising appears to represent an impermissible in-kind contribution from the DNC and the participating state party committees to HFA. At worst, using funds received from large dollar donors who have already contributed the $2,700 maximum to HFA may represent an excessive contribution from HFA from these individuals. All right, so here's the deal. There is the Hillary Victory Fund. And I know a lot of people get a little hazy when we start talking about numbers, Lewis, but we try to break this out as much as we could. There's a Hillary Victory Fund, which is completely different than Hillary for America. It is comprised of Hillary for America, the actual campaign, the DNC, and 32 state Democratic committees. In the actual expectation that has been given on Hillary for America's website, on the Hillary Victory Fund website, and by George Clooney, the expectation is that $2,700 is going to go to Hillary for America, $33,000 to the DNC, $320,000 going to the 32 states, about $10,000 to each state. So there's an expectation, Lewis, that only 1% or less than 1% is going to go to Hillary Clinton. Now, the actuals, and this is from opensecrets.org, shows that at the Q4 2015, 4.4 million went to Hillary Clinton. That represents about 42% of the money raised. The expectation, Lewis, is that less than 1% was going to go. The reality in Q4 was 42%, but it actually got worse. In Q1 of 2016, they raised $33 million. 63% of raised funds went to Hillary for America. And this is on opensecrets.org. This is also on politifact.com. This is well known and documented. The amazing thing is none of that is illegal. Everything is perfectly legal up to this point. And this is where Bernie Sanders' question actually comes in. There's 33 million raised, and there was only 15 million dispersed between Hillary Clinton and the individual states. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see they had expenses of $6.7 million that went out in online ads, 5.5 million in direct mail, and 2.6 million in salaries for HFA, Hillary for America. So there are actually $14.8 million that were spent before disbursement, Lewis. And so this is where Bernie Sanders' letter actually comes in. He's saying that the fundraising seems to be fine, but before any money is dispersed, it's already spent. And that's not a bad thing if those dollars actually benefit the DNC and the state parties and Hillary Clinton proportionately. But they have found that that 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, 8 million that has been spent on direct mail, as well as spent on online advertisement, has overwhelmingly benefited Hillary Clinton, not the DNC and not the state parties. So this is how the game is played. They take this large amount of money from large donors, like George Clooney. His money hasn't been spent yet because they just raised it. But last quarter, it was Sting, right? They used Sting to raise an obscene amount of money. They take these dollars, and instead of dispersing it right away to the state and the DNC, they spend it on advertisements that help Hillary Clinton increase her small donor amount. So if they couldn't send the total of 33 million to Hillary Clinton, essentially what they've done is said, we can't send you all of this, but we can spend a good portion of this, 14 million of this, on expenses, and we can spend it on advertising. So that does two things for you, Lewis. It helps you to actually get money advertising directly for Hillary Clinton, as well as pay for the campaign staff. And Bernie Sanders is saying, flag on the play. What do you think?
I like that the Sanders campaign is calling foul all over the place with Hillary and what she's doing. But if you had any suspicions about how that money was being allocated or spent, I mean, this is exactly how you'd think it would happen.
Right.
And so it's really not that much of a shock. But I mean, it's important for the Sanders campaign to continue to call her out. This is what he has to do to win.
But that's the thing. The thing to me is that a lot of people really have this expectation that $2,700 is all that's going to Clooney, right? All that's going to Hillary Clinton from Clooney. And the reality of it is that huge amounts are being spent before that money is ever distributed. There's so much more reporting that has to be done on this. We try to give you as much as we could, but the key point is the money has been spent. 63% of the money raised. So George Clooney's assessment that all the money, the majority of the money is going down ballot, PolitiFact rated it as true. Is actually very far from true. It's almost pants on fire, Lewis, except the fact that I think he doesn't know, like a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters just don't know.
We've talked about people wanting to have relationships with their cars or inanimate objects of all kinds. Lewis told us a story on the bonus show about a woman who's in love with trains, etc. And there's a guy in Texas who wants to marry his laptop, but it has nothing at all to do with sexual attraction to microprocessors. Instead, it's all about stopping gay marriage. The guy's name is Chris Sevier. He has filed a lawsuit against the Harris County District Clerk, Governor Greg Abbott, and Attorney General Ken Paxton for denying him his right, he claims it's his right, to marry his Mac. He's trying to prove that gay marriage, or marriage between a same-sex couple, is the same thing as marriage between man and machine, and he's trying to give courts an ultimatum. He agrees that this is what they have done by allowing gay marriage, that inherently allows him to make a vow to a series of transistors, or that everybody should realize it's just as wrong to marry your laptop as it is for a man to marry a man or a woman to marry a woman. And he hopes, Lewis, that this will have the impact of undoing national gay marriage, or at least gay marriage in Texas. And he was asked by HoustonPress.com, don't you realize that you would destroy so many families and marriages across the country if you were to succeed? And he said, the question is, should we have policies that encourage that kind of lifestyle? The state is not doing anybody any favors by encouraging people to live that lifestyle. We have to define marriage. This is unheard of delusional bigotry. As we know, laptops and dogs and mobile phones, regardless of whether they are Apple or Android, they can't sign contracts. Gay marriage has as much to do with somebody marrying a giraffe as straight marriage does. Giraffes can't sign contracts. They can't enter into legal agreements, so they can't get married. But these guys, Lewis, keep trying to push this thing. Oh, if two men can get married, then I can marry a chair.
Yeah, and I think still a big part of this, a stunt like this, is whatever this guy's name is, just trying to attract attention to himself and make a scene. Some people just enjoy doing that, and this seems like a pretty good way to do it. Yes, nowhere has any, well, I think in Florida, someone did marry a Ferris wheel or whatever, but a woman married a Ferris wheel. But anyway, yes, there's no slippery slope here. This is not leading to the end of the world or to disaster or to people marrying brooms. Everything is fine. But I don't know. It just drives this guy crazy. And you know what? Let it drive him crazy.
To give you a little bit of context, this is the same guy who back in 2014 tried to sue Apple because their devices made it really easy for him to access porn. Think about the absurdity of that. First, he blames computers for giving him access to too much porn, and now he wants to marry his computer. I guess he feels like he's been living in sin with his MacBook Pro for so long that he wants to be able to make it all on the up and up in God's eyes by marrying that device, which gives him ready access to pornography. I mean, you can't write this stuff.
If you think about it, he's basically making love to his computer all the time anyway. So maybe just let him marry it.